Nguyễn Thị Định was born in 1920 in the rural province of Bến Tre, deep in the Mekong Delta, a region that would later become famous as the cradle of female-led resistance in Vietnam. She grew up in a poor peasant family during the height of French colonial rule, where oppression, land seizures, and poverty were daily realities. As a young girl, she was known for her intelligence and fierce independence, qualities that set her apart even before she became involved in politics. In her teenage years, she was drawn into the Viet Minh, the communist-led independence movement fighting against French occupation. Her early activism came at a great cost. She was arrested, imprisoned, and separated from her family. These years hardened her resolve, shaping her into a leader who understood that struggle required both courage and sacrifice. Rather than discouraging her, the experience instilled a lifelong determination to fight for national liberation and for the dignity of the Vietnamese people. By the 1950s, Vietnam had been split in two following the Geneva Accords: the communist-led Democratic Republic of Vietnam in the north and the U.S.-backed Republic of Vietnam in the south. In Bến Tre province, where Nguyễn Thị Định lived, the division only deepened the suffering of the peasants. Harsh taxation, forced conscription, and brutal repression by the South Vietnamese government turned everyday life into a struggle for survival. Land that had once belonged to families for generations was confiscated, while opponents of the regime faced imprisonment or worse. Amid this climate of fear, Dinh worked tirelessly to organize local villagers, especially women, into underground networks of resistance. She recognized something few others did at the time: that women, often dismissed as passive or secondary, could become a powerful political and military force if mobilized effectively. Through quiet meetings, whispered instructions, and endless travel from village to village, she built the foundation of what would soon become one of the most remarkable resistance movements of the Vietnam War. The turning point came on January 17, 1960, when Nguyễn Thị Định played a central role in sparking the Bến Tre uprising, an event that electrified the entire country. On that day, peasants, armed with little more than bamboo poles, farm tools, and sheer determination, rose against the South Vietnamese authorities in a carefully coordinated action. Women, under Dinh's leadership, were at the forefront. They marched into towns carrying banners, banging drums, chanting slogans, and confronting soldiers face to face. Some women painted sticks black to resemble rifles, while others used their bodies as barricades to block convoys. The effect was astonishing. Government garrisons, confronted by massive crowds of defiant women and villagers, often chose to surrender rather than fire on unarmed civilians. For many soldiers, the sight of mothers, daughters, and grandmothers marching with such fearlessness was both demoralizing and disorienting. Within days, what began as a local uprising had spread, shaking the confidence of the South Vietnamese regime and drawing international attention to the growing unrest in the countryside. Out of the Bến Tre uprising emerged the legendary long-haired army, Doi Quan Toc Dai, a movement that would redefine the role of women in modern warfare. The name, referencing the women's long hair, was both a symbol of femininity and a declaration of strength. These were not professional soldiers. They were ordinary women, farmers, laborers, housewives, who transformed themselves into an organized force of resistance. Nguyễn Thị Định was their heart and strategist, giving the movement structure and direction. Unlike conventional armies, the long-haired army specialized in non-traditional forms of warfare. Their power lay in numbers, symbolism, and the ability to strike at the psychological foundations of the enemy. What frightened their opponents most was not their weapons, since they had few, but the unwavering courage that drove them to walk unarmed in a gunfire or lay their bodies across roads to stop military convoys. To underestimate them was a costly mistake, as they proved time and again that determination and unity could be as potent as rifles and grenades. The tactics of the long-haired army were as creative as they were effective. When villages were raided, women would organize mass protests, surrounding enemy troops with chants and songs that undermined morale. At times, They would stage mock funerals for the South Vietnamese regime, carrying coffins draped in banners to symbolize its eventual downfall. In other moments, they acted as human shields, protecting male fighters from enemy fire or covering their retreats. Some women carried out direct sabotage, cutting telephone lines, planting traps, or gathering intelligence by blending into markets and towns where male guerrillas might be suspected. Perhaps their greatest weapon was the moral and psychological pressure they exerted. South Vietnamese soldiers often hesitated to attack women, fearing the public backlash or the shame of killing defenseless villagers. Yet when repression did come, when protesters were beaten or shot, the brutality only fueled greater outrage, drawing more recruits into the resistance. Under Nguyễn Thị Định guidance, these tactics blurred the line between civilian and combatant, creating a form of people's warfare that was as much about spirit as it was about force. Nguyễn Thị Định herself rose in stature during these years, gaining recognition from both the National Liberation Front, NLF, in the South and the leadership in the North. She eventually became the first female general in the Vietnam People's Army, a groundbreaking achievement in a country where military leadership had long been dominated by men. Yet she remained deeply connected to her roots in Bến Tre, often traveling back to her home province to rally villagers and oversee operations. Her ability to inspire loyalty and courage was legendary. She could persuade hesitant villagers to march into danger, convince doubters of victory when the odds seemed impossible, and instill discipline in an army that operated without uniforms or barracks. Her leadership style was rooted not in fear or hierarchy, but in solidarity and example. She asked nothing of others that she was not willing to do herself. This authenticity made her not only a respected commander, but also a beloved symbol of the revolution. Throughout the Vietnam War, the long-haired army became a vital force in sustaining the resistance. They carried supplies along hidden trails, treated wounded fighters, gathered intelligence, and mobilized villagers for mass demonstrations. At times, their actions tipped the balance in local battles, either by disrupting enemy logistics or by boosting the morale of their male counterparts. Perhaps their greatest contribution, however, was symbolic. They embodied the idea that the entire population, not just armed guerrillas, was engaged in the struggle for independence. For American and South Vietnamese forces, this presented a nightmare scenario. Every village, every farmer, every woman could potentially be part of the resistance. The long-haired army turned the war into a truly people's war, where the battlefield was everywhere and the line between soldier and civilian could not be easily drawn. After the war ended in 1975 with the reunification of Vietnam, Nguyễn Thị Định continued to serve her country in high office. She became vice chairwoman of the National Assembly and later vice president of Vietnam, one of the most prominent women in the nation's leadership. She passed away in 1992, leaving behind a legacy that continues to inspire. To her allies, she was a national hero, a pioneer for women in leadership, and proof that courage could transform the powerless into history makers. To her enemies, she was remembered as a figure both defiant and unsettling, the woman who led unarmed villagers against soldiers and prevailed. Today, she is often called the most terrifying woman of the Vietnam War, not for cruelty or violence, but because she showed that ordinary women, bound by determination and solidarity, could terrify armies and alter the course of history. Her story remains one of the most powerful examples of how leadership, resilience, and vision can turn the impossible into reality. If you found this story of Nguyễn Thị Định and the fearless long-haired army inspiring, don't forget to like the video, share with friends, and subscribe to the channel for more untold histories and powerful stories from around the world. Your support helps us bring more incredible content to life.